Hi, I would like to welcome everybody. So my name is Angéla, Kóczé, chair of the Romani Studies Program, and we are really happy actually to have you with us on this fantastic afternoon, evening, and our open seminar is going to be around microaggression to marginalization, mental health, and social psychological impacts of racism on Roma. And we have two really distinguished speakers. Anna Kende, who is a professor of social psychology at Eötvös Loránd University, Budapest, and Monika
Mihaličková.
I
know you remember me under this name.
So I just know her.
Yeah, long time.
Yes. So Monika is a PhD candidate at the Department of Psychology, Faculty of Arts, Masaryk University, and researcher at Brno Lab of Intergroup Process, Institute of Psychology at Czech Academy of Sciences. And I will moderate today this discussion after their short introductory lecture. And after that, we will have a distinguished discussant as well, Rufat Demirov, who is a PhD candidate in international relations at CU and former Roma graduate preparation program student. So let's start with Anna.
Oh, me? Okay. I thought it would be Monika first. Do you want to go first?
Maybe you go first.
Okay, then I go first. I thought it was the other way around.
Just switch the presentation because this is my presentation.
Oh, and maybe just one technical issue, what I have to announce, right, Marty, that we're going to record this event.
Yes.
And yes.
Okay. Is there a clicker or something, or I have to click here? Because I'm not very happy standing behind
Yeah,
this.
you can take the keyboard and then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll try. I just stand here. Yeah, it's higher than me. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored. I was a bit, scared when I read the title because I am a social psychologist, so I don't really do research on any mental health related stuff, and I'm not going to say anything like that. But Monika is here, and she's a much more proper psychologist, so I think she will highlight those aspects. And so it was. First, it was a roundtable, and then we were told to give some kind of introductory lectures. So it's not a traditional talk presentation, but I still want to show you two of my studies that are kind of representative of the type of stuff we do. And one is from the perspective of the Roma minority. Both are quantitative studies, and the other is about majority society. And in both studies, I'm really interested in processes beyond the well-known effects of discrimination, for example, which are tremendously important, but still we have to recognize that there are other stuff too. And then when I'm going to present to you the research on intergroup solidarity among advantaged group members, among majority society, I want to highlight a process that may be less obvious and not and give us a little bit fuller or more nuanced picture of this, because that's more or less what I'm more interested in. So misrecognition is the focus of the first study. Okay, that's not going to work. I have to figure out how to click this. So the way we conceptualize misrecognition within this social psychological realm, it's a relatively new concept. As you can see, most studies were published after 2010. We basically think about misrecognition as an interaction or an interactive experience, which basically questions the autonomy of defining who you are as a member of a minority group. So advantage group members or majority group members would make assumptions about you that actually put you in a position that you're no longer have the autonomy to define who you are in a particular situation. And we define it along 4 dimensions, or there are 4 major incidents, how that occurs, according to these studies. That's not my theory. One is the totalizing. I'm moving on. One is totalizing misrecognition, which basically often a very well-meaning thing, but putting a person in a position to always represent their group, regardless of whether this is a choice in the particular situation. And it can sound like a recognition, because it can be like, I want to, like, I assume you have your strong views on this issue because you are a Roma person, because you are a member of the LGBT community, because you are this and that. And that can sound like I'm taking you seriously, but it's not giving the person the authority to decide whether their position, their views, their opinion come from the group membership. So the totalizing is that you're forced to always represent. Categorical is really the exclusion. It's the ultimate question, where are you really from? Questioning your sense of belonging to a society, to a group, to a nation that you would feel you're a member of. Imposing identity contact, that's kind of the best known. That's really stereotyping. That's really making assumptions about you as a member of a group based on the stereotypes, based on whatever is associated with the group. I don't really want to go into it. And the 4th one is ignoring needs. This can be organizing, after work drink for colleagues, and disregarding that some colleagues would not be drinking because of their religious affiliation. So it's really ignoring. It's not making any kind of accommodation. So these are experiences that are not discrimination. Sometimes they can feel even positive, but they still put the member of the disadvantaged group, member of the minority group, in a position that it's not their choice how they want to be a member of that group. So it's basically not their choice of identity. So we did a study about that. And what are the potential minority responses? I mean, this is actually a theory about discrimination mostly, but suggesting that your identity is directly affected by negative experiences in everyday interactions. And one potential reaction, so not to misrecognition, but to any negative reaction, is the rejection identification, which basically says that when members of minorities have like a potentially dual identification. Okay, let's simplify it. You can be a member, can have a minority identity and a national identity, which we call superordinate identity. So a subgroup identity and a superordinate identity. And basically says you would turn to your subgroup, you would turn to your minority identity when you have these negative experiences in the interaction with the majority. And another theory suggests that, well, it's not just you focus on your minority identity more, but you also disidentify, for example, from the nation. So why is that a problem? Because dual identity has been recognized as psychologically the most favorable outcome, politically the most favorable outcome. So it has many different benefits for society, for individual members. And so I don't want to go into the details because I do want to show you my study. I don't know what happened to this formatting, but for some reason, minority identity appears in blue, no matter how many times I change it to white. And the plus changes to this. I don't know what happens here, but it has a mind on its own. So our study which we conducted among Roma participants in 3 countries, that these 2 experiences, so not just discrimination, which is well known, but also misrecognition, these 4 identity denial kind of experiences would create this positive, so it would predict more stronger minority identity, which would be the rejection identification hypothesis, that you identify more with your subgroup identity, with your minority identity, Roma identity in this case, and you would turn away from national identity. And because we thought misrecognition is particularly important because it's directly about identity. It's directly about questioning your belonging and so on. So we did this study in 3 countries, Hungary, Romania, Serbia. We had very different sample in Romania. Hungary and Serbia we collected quite a good sample with the help of opinion poll survey companies online and in person. In Romania, the sample was very highly educated online access sample, but still relatively large and it's a good sample. So we measured 4 things. We measured other things too, but I'm only presenting the 4 main things here. Roma identity and national identity, strengths, how strongly you identify, and the two together create whether you have a dual identity or a primarily Roma identity or primarily national identity, and experiences with discrimination and misrecognition. And if you just look at the means, this was a scale 1 to 5, and quite clearly it shows that misrecognition was a more common experience. So people reported quite a lot of experiences with discrimination, but even more with misrecognition. And what we found, I'm just quickly jumping there, that misrecognition actually in Hungary predicted national identity negatively, so suggested that the more experiences you had with misrecognition, the less you identified as a Hungarian. And the more experiences you had with misrecognition, the more you identified as a Roma person, kind of suggesting that it's an obstacle to dual identity. And this actually erased the effect of discrimination. So when you only measure discrimination, you have the same pattern. But as soon as you add misrecognition to the model, the explanatory value of discrimination disappears. So it seems like it's even more important for identification than than discrimination. It doesn't mean discrimination is not important, but taken the two together, it seems that it has a more profound effect on identity than discrimination. However, this was not the case in Serbia, where we only found the effect of discrimination. The same pattern, but it was discrimination that drove the effect. And we had a completely different result for Romania. Both misrecognition and discrimination had a significant influence, and it had the rejection identification hypothesis was fulfilled so minority identity was stronger the more you experience this, but actually national identity was also stronger, which made us really puzzled. We were very puzzled with this result, and we came to the conclusion we don't have a way of testing it. This is completely a speculation based on the results we have. It's quantitative study. We don't have a real answer for that, but we actually think, because there is evidence in the literature and in other studies, that it's kind of like a reaffirmation strategy. You have these negative experiences, and these are more highly educated people, like 70% of them had a university degree. So you can't take away my Romanian identity by these negative experiences. We just speculate that this may have been the case because it was really different. Okay, I'm moving on. And I plan to show this to you, but we can do it afterwards, because part of this misrecognition study that we did videos with Roma participants who were given with collaboration with CU, the documentary film lab of CU. We gave GoPro cameras and this spy cam to Roma participants who were walking around, and we asked them to record these misrecognition experiences. Of course, it's not that easy because some of them are very subtle and they don't happen every day. So they recorded the experiences that were, some of them were discrimination, like finding like a rental home, like the problem of trying to find a home, and the others were typical experience was shops, entering shops and experiences with security guards that's the content-based misrecognition basically. But I want to show you later, but I still want to just spend a few minutes showing you another study we did, which I'm quite excited about. This is, we do it every other year, or we try to, if we have money, to establish the Solidarity Index of Hungary, which means the potential of solidarity across groups in the country, especially solidarity with disadvantaged people. And our assumptions are based on the fact that we think that we know solidarity is conditional, although we are obliged, it's a universal social norm that you have to help people, you have to be helpful, you have to show solidarity, but it's always very conditional, especially when it's across groups. And we assume that two of the main obstacles of solidarity is, one is the national identity vulnerability or fragility. Basically, if you have a very fragile collective identity as a Hungarian. It can be a collective narcissism. So it can be a very high self-esteem, but a very insecure one. That's usually an obstacle to express any solidarity, and it's usually the source of a lot of hostility. And people with this very fragile national identity, they tend to endorse conservative ideologies about social hierarchies. And what I mean by that, it can be belief that society has to be hierarchical. That's the only stable way. So like really firmly believing in social hierarchies, or it can be authoritarianism, or believing in like conventions should never change. The stability of society comes from not changing, and that's a threat to society if you change. So that's what I mean by endorsing conservative ideologies about social hierarchies, that you insist on the existing social order. But we also think, and that's the less research part, that aside all of these, because we know that these are obstacles, we know this very well, it's very well established, we were suspecting that it's still possible that some people would have a personal sense of moral obligation to help, kind of an individual basis, because we've seen it in the refugee crisis. There were people, both liberals and conservatives, helping. And often conservative helpers would highlight that they're helping because they feel some individual attachment. We had made some interviews, and there was one volunteer was saying, I suddenly realized she's a mother just like me with a child. So these are that's what I mean, like a personal sense of obligation. You can show solidarity despite the identity vulnerability and the conservative ideologies. So we did this as an online representative survey. Okay, I don't know why they are appearing like this, but so it was like similar demographically to Hungarian society. And so the three things we measured, four actually, but the three you are seeing here, and I try to walk you through this. The first three variables are the identity fragility, which we measured as national identities, centrality, national collective narcissism, this sense of collective victimhood. This is what we call identity fragility. The next three, social dominance orientation, right-wing authoritarianism, and system justification, that's the conservative ideologies about social hierarchies. And then the last two are these moral responsibilities, social responsibilities. And based on this, and that's what I'm trying to walk you through, we conducted the so-called latent profile analysis. We identified three typical profiles based on their answers to these scales. And the typical profile is the three colors. We have the blue. These are people with the lowest identity fragility, with the lowest conservative ideologies, and very high sense of moral obligation. Easy to guess, they will be the very solid, they will show the highest solidarity, right? Then we have the orange, kind of in the middle, quite high identity fragility, quite high endorsement of conservative ideologies, and relatively low moral obligations to help. Okay, we don't expect them to be very helpful. And then we have a puzzling third group. They are the green. They are very, very high on identity fragility. They are the highest on all the conservative ideologies, but they're also high on moral obligations and social responsibility. Now, what will they do? Okay, I have good and bad news. So the three profile. Focus on the last one. That's the full sample. And that's an important finding. The blue one, the first profile, let's call them liberals. They're very helpful people. We know they would answer. They are very helpful. Okay, it's not very high means because it's scaled from 1 to 5, but still. But the greens are also helpful in the total, right? It's the orange ones who don't have. So the greens ones are very high identity fragility, but they have a sense of moral obligation to help. But who do they help? Well, I'm afraid they don't have the Roma. So when we ask them, who do you have in mind when you say disadvantaged group? We actually didn't give them a group. They could choose. 339 people said, I had Roma people in mind. 270 said something along the lines of low socioeconomic status, poor people. 109 said something along the lines of sick people, disabled people, and then there were some others. And what you can see here, that if you compare the total and you will compare those who chose the Roma people, we find the three profile everywhere, even in equal amount. But that's where you see a very big difference between, so the moral obligation may increase your helping with poor people and disabled and sick, but it doesn't make you, open-minded and helpful, show solidarity with Roma. So what are our conclusions? I mean, okay, I don't want to over-explain it, but basically what we were interested in is to get a fuller picture of the experiences of discrimination, next to discrimination, also the experiences of misrecognition, because we feel this is a strong obstacle to dual identity that we as psychologists believe would be a favorable outcome, a favorable way of identifying as a member of a minority group. For the majority population, what we wanted to identify is whether there are alternative paths to solidarity beyond the well-known, like you believe in change, you believe like you endorse either left-wing or liberal ideologies that make you open-minded for helping, whether there is an alternative path. And we did find an alternative path, but indeed it was very limited, especially when it came to Roma, solidarity with Roma people. So yeah, that's all I'm saying. I hope really I thought the timer was set at the beginning, but it wasn't, so I couldn't watch the time. I hope I didn't speak too long, but thank you.
Can I continue? Yeah, I'd like to also thank you for the invitation to this event, and I'm really honored. And I would like to share with you our qualitative research that we conducted in Czech Republic with my colleagues about the impact of racism on mental health of Roma in Czechia. And at the beginning, I just would like to give you some background about the extent of racism against Roma in Czechia. You might be aware of some of this data, but 250,000 Roma living in Czechia, which is around 2.5% of Roma from the whole population. And 40% of them reported discrimination in key life areas within 12 plus months. 34% experienced at least one hate-motivated incident, and 1% even reported being physically assaulted. So, and among Roma who faced discrimination, 53% of them experienced the discrimination monthly, and over 14% experience it weekly. So as you can see, the experiences with racism is not a marginal problem. But there is a research gap in the psychological research. And yet, even though that Roma population in Central and Eastern European Union exceeded to 10 to 12 million Roma, and we almost know nothing about the impact of racism on mental health of this population. But when we compare it with the studies among other ethnic minorities, it shows that there is a strong link between racial discrimination and mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and strong psychological distress. But to be fair, there are some studies that were made with the Romani population and were related to these variables, which is discrimination. And one was conducted in Ukraine and one in Macedonia. And even though, and also these studies suggested the research showed that discrimination should be taken as a key determinant of mental health. And now we are getting to that, what was the aim of our research. We want to deepen the understanding of the impact of racism on mental health of Roma in Czechia, but also we wanted to know how do they cope with these experiences. And in the future, these results would help us within my goal of my PhD research, which is to develop and validate a new diagnostic tool that would help mental health professionals access stress related to these experiences. Something about participants and the methodology of our research. We conducted 2 focus groups online. We had 12 participants, 5 women and 7 men. There is a mistake also in my presentation. I'm sorry, we didn't have 79 men. The age range was between 25-63 years, with the various education place of residence and so on. And we conducted reflective thematic analysis. And we did analyze it with the other colleagues from our lab. And here are some results that you could see that shows where and how Roma experienced racism. I'll give you just a few seconds to look at it. So you could see that they experience it even in the direct way or indirect way, on individual level, institutional level, but also on the cultural level. And what we identified like a very often experience with racism were the ethnic microaggressions. We almost identified more than 100 of them, different kind of microaggressions. So, and what is like really serious problem, where what we should be aware of that Roma people experience racism from early childhood all the way into adulthood, and many first faced it at school from classmates and sometimes even from the teachers or from the coaches. And for many, it was like a real shock when they were children and like to experience for the first time that they were rejected just because of that who they are, and without really understanding why they are experiencing this. So, and most of them were telling that nobody had prepared them for that experience, that they would have that experience. And even some of them experienced it in the kindergarten. So imagine 4 or 5 years old child having these experiences. And they also shared that the teachers and other authorities often did not step in even when they saw the racist insults or threats. So I'm talking about the children, yeah. And here you can see the quotation, which is, I don't know if it's readable, but I will read it. One man who was 63 years old says, I have so many experiences, one could say experiences from at least the past 60 years. So it shows that that there is that this is a lifelong exposure to racism for most of the Roma. The next area that we identified like very strongly was the exposure to life-threatening experiences to the Roma identity. And you could see who were the perpetrators. The perpetrators, the participants were mentioning strangers, but also members of skinheads movement that that they were active during the 90s, and even in 2010 or 2017, as I remember well, there was a last public march of skinheads movement, and what we identified also that that they experience it as themselves, like the personally direct exposure to life-threatening events, but also through the others, through the loved ones, through the family, but also on the vicarious level. So they were seeing other Roma suffering, being threatening or beaten or chased by skinheads, but also by the strangers. And even though we did not suppose that this will be such a strong topic, within the qualitative research, it was. I mean, we thought that, you know, they would maybe mainly speak about the racial microaggression, but they said that it's something like very common and they get used to it. But what they really fear related to that experiences was the fear, like a really deep fear for not just for their own safety, but for the safety of the loved ones. And related to the experience, they have different kind of strategies that even using in these days. So they avoid certain places, they avoid certain people, they avoid certain events that are organized mainly by majority people. So some of them would say, I would never go to a big techno party where are no other Roma because I would be afraid that somebody would attack me. They also lost the trust in authorities and institutions because not just that authorities at school did not step in, but they also do not trust the institutions like the police because even though they reported that they were threatening or attacked or chased, you know, or even beaten, that the police did not step in properly. And some of them also were mentioning that they were, that based on these experiences, they decided to migrate within the Czech Republic. So they moved from one city to another city or from big city to village in order to feel safe, you know, because these things were happening in their cities and some of them, you are aware of that there was a huge immigration wave to Western European countries from our countries, and some of them emigrated to like Canada, England, and other Western countries. And we had there participants who emigrated and came back. So. And what was also really strong, visible was this intergenerational transmission of fear and strong parental anxiety. So Roma passes their experiences down from generation to generation, and this shapes how they raise their children. You know, so many parents feel like deep fear for them, and they worry not just about their safety but also about the safety of their children. And and for example, they were saying about their experience when they were children. Their mothers used to tell them, you are not allowed to go out today because there is this skinhead marching happening or some football matches is happening, so you are not allowed to go out. And this lady, 42 years old, she discovered that, you know, she said, I realized that I was doing the same with my children. And I didn't want to do it this way, but I realized that I passed the fear that was given to me from my mother, that I passed it to my children as a protective mechanism. So, so she said that she did the same things with her children, but at the end she stood up and she started to organize events against skinheads. Yeah, so like demonstration against skinheads to support her empowerment, and she said that she did it for her children. And then there is just it's terrible. Just look at this example that. Parental anxiety is not just personal, but it focused on the next generation's future. So there were many of participants saying, you know, that they are not afraid just for their own children, but for the children that will live, if it will be that will live in the future, and if it will be even worse or if it will be better. I will do this. I was mentioning at the beginning that we identified a lot of microaggressions, like, for example, you were mentioning this assumption of criminality, so that many people are being followed by security guard at the shopping. It's like something happening on a daily basis. or that they are intellectually inferior. And we could recognize that these cumulative experiences with racism causes anxiety and hypervigilance. So they were accepting that, they were assuming that, this discrimination could happen anywhere and from anybody, and in any places, like even at work or at school or in shops, in public places. And this anticipatory stress, I want to show. Like for example, you can read this quotation. I'll give you a few seconds. What they do, how do they think about what this anticipatory stress causes? It's like, did you have time to read it? Yeah, thank you. Like that they over-prepare for situations where they are the only one Roma. I don't know if somebody is here Roma and have the same experience, but yeah, in some situation they were describing that this is happening with the majority contact that they have. And as I said, they avoid contact with Czechs, but what also do they avoid? That they avoid like deep relations with Czechs, with Czech minority. Yeah, it's just that they are in contact with majority on daily basis, which is like very common. They meet them everywhere on the streets, in the shop, but some of them really avoid deeper relationships with Czech people. And yeah, there is just another example of microaggression that it's happening, also at work. Like one lady was working at the higher management position. She said that there were new people coming to her job, and these people were questioning her capabilities and professional capacities, and saying, "No gypsy woman will tell me what to do." Yeah, and this is very interesting that what we also identified, that there were two emotional responses. Some of them responded or they're feeling mostly anger, and this anger led them to some action. So they confronted the perpetrators, they stood up for themselves, they explain why is it with Roma in this way, or like they put some formal complaints against something what was happening to them. Like for example, one lady said that she was not allowed to go to a restaurant, and she was living in a small city, and she decided that she would formally complain about it, and then the restaurant was I'm sorry. So they had to pay a fee for that. So it was approved that it is the discrimination. And she said, at the end, I went to the restaurant and I was sitting there as a lady, and nobody was able to move me out from the restaurant. So, but she said that she was driven by the anger. Yeah? And those who are experiencing sadness, usually they avoid like conflicts. They even do not get into discussions when something is happening. They always think about that. Do I have to involve myself in these discussions or not? And they're seeking safe space, which means they want to be surrounded mainly by friends, family, and mainly by Roma. Most of them were saying this. And this is another result that we identified. It was like participants were describing the systemic racism linked to historic and ongoing injustice, even though that I was surprised at how deeply they were describing these experiences, like with a very clean mind and very clear statements. Like they are aware or angry about that there is still happening this segregations of Romani schools, that Romani women were forcibly sterilized, and even some of them, you could see, mentioned the recent events that were happening related to treatment of Romani refugees from Ukraine. For them, it was proof of systemic racism. I'll give you the read quotation, which is quite tough. Like completely loss of trust in Czech society, but not for all of them. But there was would say half of them were feeling this way. And there is also a lack of interest from majority societies. They were describing this, that there is no awareness about Romani history, that there is about Romani culture, that there is nothing about Roma in the school curricula. This is something what we have been talking about more than 35 years, it's not there. And also participants were supported or were saying this problem that they are seeing that is happening in Czech society. And this feeling of invisibility, deep disappointment, sadness, and hopelessness about the future. They were saying that I don't believe that it will be better in the future. We are dealing with this systemic issue for, 3 decades or maybe 35 years, and still it's not changing. And not last one, but also just what we identified that Roma are traumatized, and not all of the participants, but I would say few of them, we could really see that some of them were showing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorders. And we could see these impacts not just among those who experience life-threatening experiences, but also among that who were describing the accumulation of these racialized experiences. So, there is, and here are some of the symptoms of the racial trauma that we identified, like intrusive memories, physical reactions. You could read some quotation here, and this chronic hypervigilance. You could see. So whenever I leave my apartment, I'm stepping into a hostile environment, and I'm on edge, ready for anything racist that might happen. Also, dissociation avoidance that I was talking about in previous slides, and also this vicarious traumatizations of Roma, that they are listening to other stories. It triggers anxiety and distress, and not just even within the focus group, but also when they read it online, that, Roma are really informed in these days because of Facebook and Instagram and so on. So it's full of negative information that they absorb, I would say, on a daily basis. But at the end, we wanted to also concentrate on the coping and resilience, and what is helping and what is effective, what is the active coping that support them to overcome these experiences. You can see it. Many of them, as I mentioned already, this lady that would organize these demonstrations against Nazis, but also many of them decided that they want to help to other Roma, so they became civically engaged and cooperate with some different NGOs in their places where they live. They also see the education as empowerment, because we had I think 4 or 5 participants with the master degree, and they were speaking about that they see that education is something that helped them to overcome these experiences, to be able to explain what is happening to them, to be able to explain more to the perpetrators and so on. But another active coping, what we could see was this self-control, that they try to control their emotions in these situations that are happening. So, because for some of the participants, it's normal to be like reactive, like to fight, to argue in a negative way. But they were saying that the self-control is helping them to overcome these experiences. Also, as I already mentioned, some of them took legal actions and formal complaints. Yeah, there is another quotation, you could read it. And also what is important, that the social support among Roma provide validation and strength, and it is something what is really important for them. And most of them have this social support, which I think it's important. And what we have noticed, that this is important, that they have people who they can share this experience with. So I'm sorry, here, despite this ongoing experience with racism, participants demonstrated resilience and empowerment in defending their dignity. So, and here just a conclusion, like it's more summary than conclusion. What we were talking about, what are the psychological impacts include that fear from the racially motivated attacks and fear for their children's safety, anxiety in everyday contact with majority, anger related to injustice, deep sadness and helplessness, trauma schemes not only from the direct threat but also from the cumulative, systemic and vicarious experiences. What is also not discovered, but I would say this is the first research where we discovered this collective trauma that persists and is linked to this far-right violence that was happening in Czech Republic, but not just in Czech Republic, in Slovakia and Hungary as well. And that coping includes activism, self-control, building social status and education, and support from families and friends. So that's all. Here are some references, and here's my contact. Thank you for your attention.
Yes,
Just 2 minutes.
yes.
Yeah,
Before
shall
the
I?
discussion. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it's in Hungarian with English subtitles. Nem, mert anyaga van, most bocsánat, én nem tudok.
Even longer than we're supposed to be. I'm sorry.
Szerintem most it was
good. Was interesting.
Yeah, and important.
Yes.
There's one thing the best communicators always do, but most never try. You see, most people actually don't stop and think before they speak. They're just
Speak.
I've seen this video.
Voltam vásárolni Pécs mellett egy kis városban, egy drogériában.
Szóval az történt, hogy bementünk egy budai bevásárlóközpontba, és bementünk egy parfümériába.
Bementem, akkor már egy picit gyanúsan nézett a biztonsági őr.
Én mentem be először az üzletbe, és senki nem jött oda hozzám. Feltűnően elkezdtem mindennel babrálni, nézegetni a rúzsokat, meg szagolgatni a folyamatokat, nagy mozdulatokkal fújtam. Esek, hogy érdekel, de viszont senki nem kérdezett rá, hogy szeretnék-e valamit.
Tettem egy kört az üzletbe, és én azt hiszem észre, hogy folyamatosan követ. Addig a pontig, csak feltételeztem, de amikor konkrétan profilból szinte velem szembe állt, akkor így rá is fókuszáltam a kamerával. Ez számomra elég kellemetlen volt, azt kell, hogy mondjam.
És ha megfordultam, akkor már láttam, hogy bejöttek a többiek. És oda egyszerre oda ment a
hölgy. Tőlem megkérdezte a hölgy, hogy segíthet nekem valamiben, És amikor azt mondtam neki, hogy nem mert nézelődök, akkor nem hagyott nézelődni, hanem segített nézelődni, nagyon segítőkész volt. De hogy én még tesztert sem vettem a kezemben, mert azt ő vette le, és ő küldte rá a tesztercsikre, és ő szagolta meg, majd azt már nekem. Amíg bent tartózkodtam az üzletben, addig végig ott volt velem.
Majd amit viszont nem vettem fel, de tapasztaltam, hogy a biztonsági őr kijött az üzletből, és körbenézett, hogy vajon én mit csinálok. Nem gondolnám, hogy bármi olyan kisugárzásom lenne, ami ezt így eredményezné, de neki ez a munkája is elég érdekesen csinálta.
Viszont utána szegények veletek még egy 10 percet ott foglalkoztak.
Olyan kérdést kellett feltegyek, amire az volt a válasz, hogy nem tudja megoldani. És ez 10 percen telt, mire találtam egy ilyet. Elég nehezen jöttünk ki.
Stop sharing.
Yes. There's another one. There were 3, but actually one of them was withdrawn by the participants because they were afraid. They live in a smaller town and they live in a municipal building, and they were worried about repercussions. Yeah. So they withdrew the video.
Okay, so thank you so much. And now I would like to ask Rufat just to reflect on these 2 presentations.
Thank you very much, Angéla, and thank you very much, Anna and Monika. Those were 2 amazing presentations. I was enjoying while listening. I mean, in both presentations, I could freely feel that I would fit in what in the sample that you were researching, because most of the things that you mentioned, I feel them. I have passed, I have seen, I have felt, I remember, I forget, I choose to forget. So I wouldn't repeat much of what you already discussed, and maybe I would like to have also space for questions after, since it is interesting topic. I would like to maybe bring both of the presentations by asking you to maybe bring a little bit of intersectional approach in the identity of the people, because I know that for especially quantitative research, it is important to simplify things in order to have results, but then coming from here as heavy interpretive researcher, I always like to complicate the things a little bit. So I would ask you about how does the intersectional identity of people play a role in this case of microaggression, for example, or solidarity. Anna, for your research, how these intersections of members of a group play a role in helping, showing solidarity, like you said, a mother helped another woman, how much this play a role. And also maybe Monika can say a little bit about how the intersectionality plays a role in the mental health awareness, because sometimes there are parts of identities that are in tension and can clash. So this liminal in between identities, or being Roma plus woman, or being Roma and LGBT, or being Roma and something, that sometimes can create additional complications for the mental health.
Should I answer that?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't have a straight or a simple answer to that. And quantitative studies are indeed, undoubtedly simplify the experiences, but it's okay because it still helps us, I think. And I also love overcomplicating things, so it's not a problem for me. But as a social psychologist, we think of intersectional identity is not a common term. but we tend to think of identity as something, basically the way we define ourselves is through our group memberships and social categories. And we have many, many of them. Mm-hmm. And some of them are more salient in a situation, others are less salient. So we are, I'm here with my identity as a researcher first and foremost, but I also have many other identities that are important currently. I talked about a Hungarian study, obviously, that's an important identity, but intersectionality is something that social psychology generally has trouble, really acknowledging or even including in the studies, because it has this tendency, especially quantitative social psychology, to simplify the word into dual relationships. Advantage groups, disadvantage group. That makes life so much simpler than reality. But I completely agree that these experiences, from the perspective of the misrecognition study, we not only acknowledge, but we also believe this is profoundly connected to intersectional identities, because that's precisely what happens in a situation that you're never cleanly one thing. The point of the misrecognition is that your many other identities, you don't have the freedom to choose any of your identities because you're reduced to one identity. So that's the core of the problem in a way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's done in a positive light and actually could feel good, because it fits your current, what you want. Yeah. And we also find, we have a completely different study about misrecognition of LGBT people. And there we find that this misrecognition, this negative experience, actually predicts higher identity centrality. People who have more of this misrecognition, which is fundamentally a negative experience, they actually identify more strongly as LGBT people, and they turn that identity centrality into action, into positive action for the group. So we recognize the complexity of it. It's a reduction of the identity. It's negative, but sometimes it actually turns into something positive. So while I don't have any answer to that, how we recognize it, but it's fundamentally there, because that's the whole point of it, that you are reduced to an identity. And sometimes you are happy with it, but many times you would like more freedom in identifying who you are. And from the solidarity study, maybe it's less relevant here, but this national identity fragility is, it's many things. So we also measure it with 3 different ways. So like collective narcissism, identity centrality, and collective victimhood. They are different things, of course, but they all have something to do with like, you have this inflated sense of self. You're really superior, better than anybody else. Nobody can reach us, but you're so fragile in this, you have to defend it. But it's also your inability to recognize that you're many things in life. And you are just so, you're defending your one identity that you feel people don't want to recognize. So in a way that I'm not saying it's intersectional, but it's about the difficulty of, or you want to protect your one identity, and that's the main reason you are hostile to other groups, and you're even hostile to the many things you are yourself. So it's also a problem of a general identification with the many things we are in life, sometimes really contradictory. Your family values, that something you identify could be really different from your other identities. It creates a lot of internal struggle. I don't know the psychoanalyst, but you can recognize that this all adds to this fragility of your national identity, that your inability to come to terms with the many things you are.
Mm-hmm. I just would like to support what you have said. It reminds me the quotation of one of our participants who adopted some kind of cognitive coping with the experience of racism, that he said, I have to remind myself that I refuse to be reduced to only that I am Roma. I am father, I am brother, I am fisherman, I'm a photographer, I do all of this stuff. And this is something what really helps me when discrimination is happening to me just because of that I am Roma. So I would support it, that this is this kind of cognitive coping that we could do, or that people who experience racism or discrimination can use that cognitive coping to protect themselves, to protect their mental health. And related to intersectional aspect, it also reminded me that, you know, people who were saying that they were trying to build their social status, which is also a strong determinant, you know, related to intersectionality, that even though that they had that social status, it was still not helpful. So the identity of being Roma was still the strong determinant of that this experience were happening to them. And we did not have, at least we are not aware of that, we did not have of people during the focus group, but since I've been working in this field for so many years, I could just support that queer Romani people face multiple discrimination, not just because of that they are Roma, but also because of that some of them experience discrimination from their own communities and even from their families when they are in the more traditional families. They are describing that they face these experiences, that some of them were even excommunicated from the families or from the whole communities. But also, they also describe that they experience the discrimination within the LGBTIQ community just because of their ethnicity. So I think that we have to also, in the psychological research, look into more depth into these aspects of the intersectional of the intersectionality. So, and there is still a lack of studies related to that topic, especially related to mental health issues. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I started my first PhD topic actually was dealing with having the tension between intersectional identity, and I started out with ethnography. I ended up with generalized anxiety disorder, so I couldn't go on with it because of how I re-traumatized myself. That's how what happens sometimes. And maybe my last question maybe for you to reflect. You briefly, Monika, mentioned the resilience as somehow coping mechanism, and here while you were talking, I was often reflecting on awareness and ignorance as mechanisms of dealing with reality of racism and etc. Or sometimes purposefully being delusional in certain moments of facing the racism. Like it happens to me often, people to go after me in the shop thinking I would steal, but then I'm saying to myself, maybe they're here to help, and then I'm saying, can you carry this for me? Can you help me? You know, like in purpose. Or about this, and also about the resilience, because my current research now deals with resilience in circumstances living under racism, and I'm researching weddings and dancing, like a way of moving on. Mm-hmm. So maybe if you can say something about this moment of resilience and maybe of the dance, and Ionida Kostaki also researches on the music, like coping mechanism too.
There are different approaches, and I think what was the strongest result from our research that they don't want to be seen as second-class citizens because they don't see themselves as they are identified by the majority. Mm-hmm. And this is something what was inside of them, that even though you see me as second-class citizen, I have my value. And this value is related to that who I am and who is my family and what is my culture about. That's why they were also mentioning that that it's important to get this information about Romani history, about Romani cultures, about Romani values into the school books, or to inform the Czechs more about that who are the Roma, because they they, even though they were experienced these bad situation in their lives, we could see that, they still want to keep their dignity and their belonging to the Roma minority. So it was like very strong, and there we're mentioning different kind of copings. I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but this is where I'm feeling the resilience, that this is something what it's really helpful to support their culture, to know who you are as a minority member. But many of them were also mentioning, okay, but we are Czechs too. This is our home where we live, This is where we belong to. So there are different aspects. And to answer to your question, that what you were mentioning, that in some situation you decide to say yourself that, okay, maybe they want to help you. Everything is possible, just do what is helpful. Because sometimes it's, when it's happening too often, sometimes it's better to pretend that you are not seeing it, that you are not that emotionally involved in this situation.
But then on long term, maybe that can affect the mental health here. I mentioned some identity or personality disorders that are maybe likely to occur when you long are living under circumstances like that. Have you thought of that maybe?
Yeah, it could cause like different kind of impacts. For example, you could see some people who internalize the negative stereotypes about Romani people, and they start to believe about that negative attitude and negative stereotypes, and it can cause the distancing from the ethnicity, from the family. They feeling ashamed about other Roma, and they, refuse to be connected with Roma ethnicity, and so these things could cause different kind of impacts that could be identified as internalized racism, but there are different levels, that could cause the changes or impacts on your identity. But I think that this one is the strongest one, and used to say that these people are more racist than the racist than the racist from majority, because they refuse completely to be identified as Roma.
Because their racism maybe comes from fear.
They are the victims of racism, and I would say that this is the worst things that could happen to you. And
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is really heavy, even to listen it. But I'm really happy actually that we started the discussion about it, because usually we're just talking about racism, discrimination, particularly the visible discrimination and racism, but we are not really talking about the social, psychological, processes, mechanisms, how does it impact people. And I find it really interesting, talking about solidarity, as Anna was pointed out, that it's always conditional, right? So what kind of social conditions do we need to create, right, in order to avoid these kinds of social, psychological effect on people? What you were talking about, it like personal, institutional, cultural racism, and microaggression as well. In fact, I was thinking about that how does it relate to policies? Because we are always talking about describing this, but what can we do in a real situation? And how can we nurture such a social political condition where solidarity could be, could thrive and could be placed and could support people. And I would like to open this for discussion and involve you guys who are here in the classroom. And also we have several people online who join us today. I guess the theme itself is really sparked a huge interest. So I would like to open the floor for discussion. And I would like to ask you to identify yourself. Do you have any questions, comments? Maybe. Anyone? Thank you.
Definitely do. But yeah, I guess I have one question for each of you, and I have many questions, but maybe afterwards. I guess one, Anna, is like you were showing the results of like how, in this case of these people have individual moral responsibility, but not when it comes to Roma. But like throughout your research, you've kind of seen this case where in like typical social psychologist research, when researching the Roma population, it doesn't necessarily always fit like what the typical results would be. For instance, like anti-prejudice interventions, or even just measuring prejudice interventions when it comes to the Roma population. Mm-hmm. Maybe can you give a little bit more of like what those challenges are and what your thoughts are, and what's the reason why there's such a difference, and like how in this field you can kind of overcome that, because a lot of the times the results are just like, oh, it's just different for Roma, but we need a little bit more. How do we understand the context of why it's actually different when it comes to the results? Mm-hmm. And for Monika, I guess there's a question that popped in my mind, especially when it comes to the ability for coping. So other research on like intergenerational trauma shows that it takes like generations after like a traumatic event or traumatic experiences for self-identification to happen, and also for different emotional responses, right? So for instance, like there'll be fear and anxiety that's passed on through these intergenerational mechanisms, but it takes a couple generations for that generation to be able to actually then overcome that, to be more active within the community, and to actually have like the safety to be able to be vocal and active. And so when you're describing this, I guess like level of threat, my question is there different emotional responses to what different level of like threat people have? So like I'm thinking like a hypothesis would be that people who are constantly threatened on a daily basis, or like the threat level intensity is high, that they can't necessarily escape their identity, right? Versus like those who are moderately threatened, whether it's through microaggressions or maybe not such high levels or high intensity, they're able to maybe sit in the background in terms of like self-identification and not necessarily feel like they have a responsibility or ability to be able to participate or to cope. And so they maybe like their coping mechanism might be to distance. Mm-hmm. And then versus like those who are, let's say, kind of experience low levels of threat or very, no threat at all, that they actually have the ability to self-identify higher, and also to be more to be able to be more active. And I guess their emotional responses might be easier to have anger, or to have like some other kind of non-distancing emotional response. So I just wanted to see if you saw that pattern in your research before. Yeah.
No.
You go first, and I will.
Yeah. So last summer, I published a paper, which was actually addressing this topic. I should have reread it to answer your question properly. But I want to start by saying that on the one hand, each intergroup prejudice, each intergroup situation is unique. So it's not like, prejudice against the Roma is unique and everything else is the same. No, each unique, but each have a very similar psychological pattern and mechanism. So unique, but also universal. At least I believe that. So, but there are some features that make prejudice interventions particularly challenging when it comes to fighting anti-Gypsyism, anti-Roma prejudice, and it has something to do with the many levels that Monika was describing. So basically, because it's just really prevalent on an individual interpersonal level, microaggressions, invisible stuff, to the most visible policy and institutional level. So the challenge is really how deeply rooted it is. That's one of the challenges. The second challenge, which we have seen repeatedly, and we have some empirical evidence supporting that somehow it's very normative. Most people think that if they have negative views of Roma people, they feel like they belong to the mainstream. They assume people will agree with them. And it's much more challenging to find any kind of opinion, attitude, prejudice that people feel really supported about. So like that they feel like others agree with. Why would I change my mind? Everybody thinks that. That's normal. So it's much more challenging to change something that's normative than change the views when you feel like you suddenly realize like, yeah, the word has changed somehow. I need to adjust. It's not, people are, conservative. We are all conservative in our views, the way our mind works, in our information process. I don't mean like politically conservative, but we don't like to change our minds. So it's always challenging to change people's minds, but particularly when they don't see a reason for that. And the lack of reason is that everybody else thinks this way. Another challenge is, but that's really specific to psychology and the social psychology, and particularly because this discipline has so many of the methods that we use, intervention methods, are very US focused and they are very individual based. So they focus on how to change the minds of individuals. The intervention is targeting the individual, how you need to personally change your ways. And again, this comes back to the fact that it's not really an individual level problem. It's also an institutional problem and so on. And, but I do have good news too. I decided to share that with you because, so in this paper that we published, it also contained a meta-analysis, which is like a combination of all studies we could access, which measured prejudice against Roma people and contact, yes, because intergroup contact is the most accepted, most widespread method of prejudice reduction, which basically says that under certain conditions, if you create opportunities for positive contact, cooperation, that actually reduces prejudice, the experience is generalized. And we found while mere frequency of contact doesn't actually help, because it can be any kind of contact. And when it comes to Roma people, often people recall negative contact and more often than positive contact. So we don't find a connection. But if it's friendships, then suddenly it works. If you have a Roma friend, or report you have a Roma friend, that's actually a good thing. But what's the optimistic version of it? That we also looked at the Eurobarometer data of, I forgot how many countries, 25 or 31 countries, I can't remember exactly. And what we found that the impact of having Roma friends on prejudice, so on reducing prejudice, is stronger in countries where the overall prejudice level is higher, which basically means that the impact of any intervention that is based on these positive emotions, positive contact, positive experience, actually could be more impactful in countries where there's more reason to do them. Which I thought was actually nice. And we explained it because it's counter-normative. If you actually think like you have this good experience, it's more impactful because it has like larger meaning for you. It's less often it happens, or it's not less often because of course these are also countries where more Roma people live, but still it's in like let's simplify it, Western countries where it's not okay to be prejudiced, at least on the surface. I mean, times are changing, but never mind. This has a smaller impact. So it's, of course, you still do it, but I thought that was actually nice to find that because it's so counter-normative, this positive experience have actually a bigger impact. I don't know if I answered you.
I don't know if I understood well your question, but I will try to start with that. You were talking about the intergenerational transmission of different kind of negative experiences that are happening within the minorities. But what concerns me is that we don't have any study related to intergeneral trauma related to Romani Holocaust, sterilization of Romani women, and now we have just few data based on that our qualitative research that we did, and the biggest topic and the strongest topic was the fear from the skinheads movement, and we could monitor that there were people who were 25 till 63 old persons, and all of them were speaking about these experiences. They were experiencing it as children. Like there was one participant who said, I still remember when I was 5 years old and I was lying on the floor and hiding myself with other people from my family, from the skinheads who were marching on the street. And I will never forget that fear. And he's carrying this fear with him all his life. He's now around 35 or something like that. And this person is, I could say that, this person belonged to that person where we were identifying the symptoms of post-traumatic disorders. So the accumulation of the not just the life-threatening experiences, but together with microaggressions and daily discrimination, cause like serious mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and especially if I remember this participant, I would say that he is traumatized because he has a lot of unproceeded experiences from his childhood, and I would say that he felt into the deep depression. So even though that we could see some patterns related to microaggressions, that they are taken like something normal and it's not a heavy experience, but it's still humiliating experience. And the accumulation of these microaggressions causes the tension and anxiety also. Like I would say that most of these people who were describing the microaggressions were feeling anger. And the combination of the fear and anger that is still happening on a daily basis, which is not life-threatening experiences, but these microaggressions remind them that remind them about these bad experiences related to the life-threatening events that were happening in their lives. It's still like interconnected. You cannot separate. It's accumulation of experiences with these big, huge negative experiences where they were afraid of their lives, that they will not survive. One of our participants said, I was beaten by skinhead that much that I barely, lived, that I was afraid that I would not be able to live. So the accumulation and combination, all these together could cause the racial trauma. And there are studies related to racial trauma, but none of these studies were made with Romani participants, or not Romani, but with Romani people. So basically, there is a missing. Nobody has ever asked how Roma feel. There is a lot of researches made on that, where Roma experience racism, that there is this institutional racism, segregation of Roma people at school, everywhere in different institutions. But what I would like to ask researchers and psychologists, clinical psychologists mainly, please include Roma in your researches. Ask Roma how do they feel in different kind of situations, and what do they experience, and what kind of help they would need. And just one thing that I would like to add, we also ask the participants if they would be interested to get some support from psychologists, that they would go to psychotherapy or some psychological counseling. And most of them said that yes, that they would go. But half of them said that I would prefer to have Romani psychologists or psychologists with a different than white background, because I assume that this person would understand me more. But there were half of them, the half of the rest of them, they were saying, I don't think it's important. I think it's important that these psychologists would acknowledge and admit that I have these experiences and that they will be able to speak with me about these experiences, so that they would not say that it's not happening to me. So yeah, just and there is still, and one thing that I would suggest that we need to do, and then I will finish with that for example, within the psychotherapy trainings, that I think that we should include into the methodology that is happening while you are going through the psychotherapy training, that there will be included the question of discrimination and racism and the impact on mental health, so that the specialists and psychotherapists, future psychotherapists, will be trained in this topic. And that is something what we are missing here in Europe. In the United States, it's something what is really like very common, basic education, that you have to pass through this, but we don't have nothing like that. And at least in Czech Republic and in our Eastern European countries, I'm not aware about anything like that, you know.
Also, if we had, maybe that would deepen the marginalization, like having therapists specialized for the Roma, maybe would create additional stereotypes of the Roma as, you know, mentally not very stable, or reproduce some stereotypes from
Yeah, but I think the approach, like to taking racism as a trauma, it's already would be a huge step, and if they would be educated about that, I think that would be really important. Anyway, I think we have someone from online, right?
Yeah, online questions, unless people can ask it directly, or I can read from the chat.
Can we ask that person?
I can, yeah. I don't know if they are, because they put it in the chat. So everybody is congratulating, and they really like the presentation. Somebody asked where they can read the results, if you published it somewhere, where they can find it. Somebody from Slovakia asked if a similar research was done in Slovak context, if you are aware, and what could be the role of educational institutions in this topic. That's a broader question for both of you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Would you like to reflect on?
I work a lot. I have a very close colleague in Slovakia. We do almost everything together. So suddenly I'm these two studies, I didn't have a Slovak partner. Kind of the only two studies I didn't have Slovak partner. But almost in everything else, I work with Slovak colleagues. And different question.
The educational institutions, what's their role?
What shall we do here?
Yeah, so actually, no, I don't know. I don't want to answer that because it's not my field. Of course, I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
But just what came to my mind is we didn't talk about the healthcare sector. You didn't mention it, but just today I had this really gut-wrenching experience. I had a class this morning, and the students were showing the results of their mini studies. And one group did 3 interviews with nurses in neonatal care departments, and particularly about their attitudes towards Roma mothers. And I mean, it was a list of really horrible stuff. And then I really thought, like, okay, but this is a very special thing, like neonatal care. Obviously, they have to learn about how to deal with premature babies, and you wouldn't think that's particularly the area, but actually it is very, very much affected. There are a lot of Roma women who give birth prematurely, even disproportionately higher numbers, and the outcome of that is, of course, because you said you started talking about children, and then I thought, like, yeah, well, it can happen to a in a situation when you have a baby 28 week, born on the 28th week, and it really matters what kind of experience you get in this really long stay in the hospital. So anyway, yeah,
in this
there are
very
a lot
early
of
stage in your life, right?
yeah,
Mm.
and a lot of intersectional
Yeah.
prejudice there.
Monika, we still have 1 minute.
We can do in educational institutions.
Yeah.
I think that we are already doing it because you invited us for this lecture that we are giving about this topic. And yeah, I would like to see more students who would be interested in the research in this field.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to support students of psychology, sociology, or social psychology to do more research about this topic, to just relate to Roma, but other marginalized minorities. And let's do it together. I think that we need more research so that the future interventions would be based on our quality research that we will bring to the scientists, but also to the psychologists or psychotherapists, so they can base their work on the very good research. So this is what I would support that we should do.
Yeah, I think it's a really great call to close this part. Thank you so much. I think it was so important, and though it was depressing, but it also very inspiring that we have to work on this field, and hopefully some of you will continue this type of work. So thank you so much, and also we would like